Hey, class, welcome back. We are talking about World War II still today, and we're talking about the Allied powers and their leaders. We talked about the Axis powers, which was Italy, Germany, and Japan. And today we're talking about the Allied powers and their leaders, which was Great Britain, the United States, France, and the Soviet Union and Canada. All these were part of the Allied powers that were fighting against the Axis powers. So in World War II, and that's what we're talking about today. So, like I said, it fought between two major groups of nations, and they became known as the Axis powers and the Allied powers. And the major Allied powers were Britain, France, Russia, and the United States. And they were formed mostly as defense against attacks on the Axis powers. Uh, the original members of the Allies included Great Britain, France, and Poland, because Germany invaded Poland to start this war, and so Britain and France, they declared war on Germany because they were part of their group of friends. I've always said they're friends. They were friends. They had each other's back. So uh, that is the original, and then the United States joined after the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Allied powers and leaders. World War II was fought between two major groups of nations that became known as the Axis and Allied powers. The major Allied powers were Britain, France, Russia, and the United States. The Allies formed mostly as a defense against the attacks of the Axis powers. The original members of the Allies included Great Britain, France, and Poland. When Germany invaded Poland, Great Britain and France declared war on Germany.
All right. So at the start of World War II, Russia and Germany, they were friends. But on June 22nd, 1941, Hitler, who was the leader of Germany, he ordered a surprise attack on Russia. They were supposed to be friends because he did not like Joseph Stalin and did not like the Soviet Union. So they ordered a surprise attack. Well, Russia said, "No, we're not going to have that. We're going to go ahead and we're going to join with the Allied powers instead of the Axis powers." And so this is how Russia became an ally.
Russia became an ally. At the start of World War II, Russia and Germany were friends. However, on 22nd June 1941, Hitler, the leader of Germany, ordered a surprise attack on Russia. Russia then became an enemy of the Axis powers and joined the Allies.
All right. So the United States, they tried just like in World War I. We tried to stay neutral, but there was a surprise attack at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese, and this attack, it united the country against the Axis powers, and it turned the tide of World War II in the favor of the Allies.
The U.S. joins the Allied powers. The United States had hoped to remain neutral during World War II. However, the U.S. was attacked by surprise at Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. This attack united the country against the Axis powers and turned the tide of World War II in favor of the Allies.
All right. So the leaders of the Allied powers, you had Great Britain, you had Winston Churchill. Right here, this man right here, that's Winston Churchill. Here's the Prime Minister of Great Britain during most of World War II. And he's a good leader. And his country was the last country fighting against the Germans in Europe. He's known for his famous speeches and people when the Germans were bombing them during the Battle of the Battle of Britain. So he was one of the leaders, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain. Then you had Franklin D. Roosevelt. We have talked about him very much with the Great Depression, and he was also the president of the United States during World War II. So he was one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States. He served 3 different terms, or actually 4 different terms, but 12 years as president. He's the last president to do that. He led the country out of the Great Depression and through World War II. So we had Winston Churchill here and Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Leaders of the Allied powers. Great Britain. Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain during most of World War II. Winston Churchill was a great leader. His country was the last country fighting against the Germans in Europe. He is known for his famous speeches to his people when the Germans were bombing them during the Battle of Britain. United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, one of the greatest presidents in the history of the United States. President Roosevelt led the country out of the Great Depression and through World War II.
All right, then you had Joseph Stalin here. This is Joseph Stalin here on the left. His title was General Secretary of the Communist Party, but he led Russia through terrible and devastating battles with Germany. Because, like I said, they were trying to be friends with Germany at first, but Germany attacked them, in 1941, and they said, all right, well, we're going to switch to the Allied side. So after winning the war, he set up the Eastern Bloc of Soviet-led communist states, and we're going to talk more about him with the Cold War when we talk about it. So then he had France, the leader of France, Charles de Gaulle, leader of the Free French. He led the French resistance movement against Germany. These are all part of the Allied leaders.
Leaders of the Allied powers continued. Russia, Joseph Stalin. Stalin's title was General Secretary of the Communist Party. He led Russia through terrible and devastating battles with Germany. Millions and millions of people died. After winning the war, he set up the Eastern Bloc of Soviet-led communist states. France, Charles de Gaulle, leader of the Free French. De Gaulle led the French resistance movement against Germany.
All right. So, comprehension question. This was a short lesson because we don't have as many leaders as we did with the Axis powers. Who were the major Allied powers in World War II? Was it A, South America, B, Britain, France, Russia, and the US, or C, Australia and New Zealand? It was B, Britain, France, Russia, and the United States. Those were the Allied powers.
We have a winner.
Number 2, what country attacked Russia that caused them to join the Allied powers? Was it A, Germany, B, China, or C, Canada? It was A, Germany. Remember, they were friends at first, and then Hitler led a surprise attack on him because he didn't really like Stalin, didn't like Russia, so he led a surprise attack. Well, that forced Russia to switch sides and join the Allied powers.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 3, what attack caused the U.S. to join the Allied powers? A, Pearl Harbor, B, Iwo Jima, or C, Fort Sumter? It was A, Pearl Harbor. The United States tried to stay neutral. They didn't want to be part of this war, just like they didn't want to be part of World War I. And then the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and all bets were off. And they said, "Oh, they declared war the very next day."
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 4, who were the leaders of Great Britain and the U.S.? Was it A, George Washington and John Adams, B, Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, or C, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Charles? It was B, Winston Churchill. He was the prime minister of Great Britain at the time. And Franklin D. Roosevelt was our president. He started being president, and he took over for Herbert Hoover in 1932, 33, and was still the president all the way through 1945 when he died.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Who were the leaders of Russia and France? A, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, B, Barack and Michelle Obama, or C, Joseph Stalin and Charles de Gaulle? It was C, Joseph Stalin and Charles de Gaulle. He was the leader of Russia at the time whenever Hitler turned his back on him and attacked him. So he came over to the Allied powers. And later on, we'll talk more about him in the Cold War because he had some very heinous crimes against him during the Cold War that he did to people, much like Hitler with the Holocaust. And then Charles de Gaulle was the leader of France. So it's C.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
And that is all for the Allied powers. We will be back next time, and we'll be talking about Pearl Harbor, how the United States entered the war. You all have a good day. I'll see you next time.